Giza Plateau, Egypt. The Great Pyramid is arguably the most enigmatic structure on the face of the Earth. It is the only surviving wonder of the ancient world and has inspired endless speculation as to how it was built and what purpose it served.
Ever since the first studies of the Great Pyramid in Egypt have been made, researchers have been amazed at the mathematical knowledge that is encoded into the Great Pyramid, the measurements that are used in it. Even the placement of the Great Pyramid has aroused great interest among Egyptologists.
The Great Pyramid is aligned to within 3/60ths of a degree of north, a more accurate alignment than any other structure on Earth.
When you look at the Great Pyramid's alignment, it's aligned very, very close to true north. Even more interesting is to think about tracking back in time, because the Earth's axis has been shifting slowly. It's what we call precesses. And so if there's been a shift in that alignment, it could be that it was even more accurately aligned to north in the past when they built it.
The Great Pyramid is not only perfectly aligned to the cardinal points, its placement on the Earth is seemingly intentional as well.
If you pass a great circle from the Great Pyramid through its cardinal and its ordinal directions, what you find is that these circles will pass through more landmass of the Earth than any other location on the Earth. You find that the Great Pyramid is essentially located at the center of the world's landmass.
Since the first accurate survey of the Great Pyramid in 1925, mathematicians and researchers have discovered even more profound connections relating to geodetic information, or information pertaining to the measurement and representation of the Earth, encoded in its design.
The Great Pyramid was built with a level of technological sophistication far in excess of anything that we have today. They don't use the inch as we normally have it in the English system. It's the cubit. And what's interesting about this cubit is that it is exactly 1/25 millionth of the polar diameter of the Earth, meaning the distance from the North Pole to the South Pole of the Earth. Chop it up into 25 million pieces, there's your cubit. It's perfect.
Is that if you actually take the length of the Great Pyramid at its mean socket level, which is the corners of the actual building, it translates into 365.24 pyramid cubits, which just happens to be the earthly year right down to a quarter day.
The measurements of the length and width of the perimeter of the Great Pyramid correspond to an exact fraction of both the latitude and longitude measurements at the equator. Scaled up, this means the Great Pyramid directly corresponds to the circumference of the equator, as well as the measurement from the equator to the pole, making it a scale model of the Northern Hemisphere. Recently, using satellite technology, researchers have realized yet another advanced formula encoded in the design.
If you take the location of the Great Pyramid as a coordinate, this number sequence of this coordinate matches exactly the speed of light traveling through space, measured in meters per second. This is amazing stuff. When you consider the vast amount of information about the Earth that's encoded into the Great Pyramid, you can't just dismiss all of this as pure coincidence.
The Valley of the Kings, Egypt. The Taj Mahal, Agra, India. And King Pakal's tomb, Palenque, Mexico. Spectacular burial sites that date back thousands of years are found across the world. According to mainstream researchers, these locations are the final resting places for ancient leaders. But might they also serve a more profound, perhaps extraterrestrial purpose?
Why do we have the most massive of constructions in the far and distant past? Well, and according to the ancient texts and the ancient traditions, this knowledge was given to our ancestors by the gods.
If the sole function of tombs was to house the dead, then why are virtually all of these connected to notions of spiritual energy, images of astronomy, and a strong belief in the existence of other, arguably more spiritual worlds?
All cultures share this notion of somehow opening a doorway, opening a stargate, opening a gateway to another dimension so the soul can return. We know that it is meant because the soul is going to go on a voyage to the afterlife.
In the ancient world, there was a view that this life that we have, this physical life, is our opportunity to prepare ourselves for a vast destiny that lies beyond this life.
Could ancient tombs really have served another, more extraterrestrial purpose? Perhaps as portals to reunite the deceased with celestial beings. Many ancient astronaut theorists believe the answers can be found by taking a closer look at the mysterious texts of ancient Egypt. Saqqara. Situated on the west bank of the Nile River, 20 miles south of Cairo, this archaeological site is one of the oldest and largest burial grounds in all of Egypt. Overlooking the immense necropolis lies the pyramid of King Teti, the first ruler of Egypt's 6th dynasty. Teti built his pyramid and an adjoining mortuary temple during his reign more than 4,000 years ago.
Now, this pyramid is very important. It contains the oldest religious writing in the world, the pyramid texts.
According to archaeologists, the pyramid texts are a collection of ancient Egyptian religious writings that date back to 2400 BC. They contain passages about Osiris, the Egyptian god of the afterlife, and descriptions of how to prepare the pharaoh's remains during his ascent to the heavens after death. But according to ancient astronaut theorists, the pyramid texts didn't only guide the pharaoh to an afterlife. They actually provided instruction on how the pharaoh could travel to other worlds.
What is important to realize is that the ancient Egyptians say that about 25,000 years ago, the gods lived amongst them. Then they disappeared again. What the pyramid texts are saying is that we, the ancient Egyptians specifically, of course, are able to reach the gods again. For this we have to die, but once we're dead, we're able to join the gods once again. What we're talking about is some kind of other dimensional travel for the soul to undertake.
The Nile Delta, Egypt. A small centimeters-wide trail is cut in the desert floor by the rolling cocoon of a dung beetle. This strange-looking 2-inch-long insect, also called a scarab, uses the dung as both a source of nourishment and a place for storing its eggs. It will roll the ball in a straight line despite all obstacles, and is the only insect on Earth known to navigate by following the light of the Milky Way galaxy. Biologists just made this discovery in 2013. But 5,000 years ago, with presumably no knowledge of its unique connection to the stars, the ancient Egyptians held the scarab as a sacred symbol, representing a link to the gods.
Interesting that a great civilization could pay so much attention to a little bug. But it appears constantly throughout Egyptian temples and hieroglyphics. It's a very frequent image.
At the Temple of Karnak, overlooking the sacred lake, where the pharaohs received their coronation, a giant scarab beetle stands watch, representing the Egyptian god Khepri.
The Egyptians saw the sun moving across the sky during the day. Also around the desert sands, you'd see beetles moving balls of dung. And so the Egyptians thought that the force that moved the sun across the sky was a giant scarab beetle god, Khepri.
And they believed that the sun was what is known as the Eye of Ra, which was Ra's chariot, or his flying machine. And the thing that moved it, they believed, was the scarab-headed god, Khepri. And the scarab represented Khepri, the pilot, if you like, of Ra's sun ship or barge. He was basically a pilot to the gods.
But could there be another explanation for why the Egyptians regarded Khepri as a pilot? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest that the representation of Khepri as a scarab, and sometimes as a human with a scarab head, may have been inspired by actual contact the Egyptians had with an otherworldly being.
One has to wonder whether or not these beings actually existed, because the ancient Egyptians were incredibly proud in carving their history into countless of walls. And according to the ancient astronaut theory, we all came about through a deliberate mutation of our genes. And so it is entirely possible, in my opinion, that some of those creatures that we see depicted in reliefs and in carvings might have actually existed in the past.
Is it possible the ancient Egyptians could have encountered alien beings that had an insect-like appearance? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. And as further evidence, point to the fact that the Egyptians' obsession with the scarab also extended to their funerary rituals. Abydos, Egypt, 7 miles west of the Nile. Within this expansive archaeological site lies the ruins of the Osiris Hall, where thousands would gather to worship the god of the underworld.
In comparison to many of the gods, Osiris was actually thought to have lived physically on Earth as one of Egypt's pharaohs. He is often depicted with a winged disk of the sun. And while many scholars have suggested that this is nothing else but to worship the sun, that sun, as far as the Egyptians were concerned, also had wings, and it descended from the sky. So in my opinion, something else was depicted, an extraterrestrial event that in fact took place in real life.
Although most ancient astronaut theorists believe that the Egyptian gods were, in reality, extraterrestrial visitors, there are many who wonder if Osiris was even made of flesh and blood.
One of the most famous stories that go hand in hand with Osiris was that he was dismembered by his jealous brother Seth.
Set went into a fury and tore his brother's dead body to shreds, tore it into 14 pieces. But Isis, the loyal wife, searched far and wide and found the pieces and pulled it together.
Isis succeeded in resurrecting him. Now, when I hear a story like that a being is dismembered and then somebody puts together those pieces and then they're able to magically resurrect him, I have to ask the question, is it possible that Osiris was not some type of biological entity, but perhaps he was some type of a machine or a robot?
For ancient astronaut theorists, perhaps the strongest evidence that Osiris may have been a robot can be found in the ancient pyramid texts, which describe the symbol of the Djed pillar as Osiris's spine.
Osiris in his resurrected form was portrayed as a pillar that clearly resembles a modern-day Tesla coil. The Djed pillar was considered a power pillar.
In this one carving at Abydos, it is as if Isis has her hand inserted into Osiris's back. And so perhaps it illustrates how she was manipulating Osiris. Could it be that the story of Osiris is something completely different than what we have thought?
Is it possible that our ancestors encountered highly sophisticated extraterrestrial robots in the ancient past? And if so, might there be some tangible evidence? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes. Saqqara, Egypt, 1850. While on an expedition to recover ancient manuscripts for the Louvre Museum in Paris, French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette spots a strange object sticking out of the sand. Intrigued, Mariette has the sand cleared away and finds large rocks blocking what looks to be the entrance to an underground chamber. After using explosives to remove them, he gains entrance to a tomb complex, also known as the Serapeum. In April 2018, ancient astronaut theorist Giorgio Tsoukalos and Egyptologist and Cairo native Rami Rahmani visited this mysterious site.
The Serapeum of Saqqara, Giorgio. Magnificent. The name Serapeum comes from Serapis, which is Apis bull and Osiris, combined together in one Greek god.
Located deep beneath the desert surface lies a 790-foot-long passageway. There, within a series of alcoves, neatly carved out of the limestone rock, are 24 gigantic stone sarcophagi. Each sarcophagus measures approximately 13 feet long, 7.5 feet wide, and over 10 feet tall. But just how the ancient Egyptians managed to transport these massive granite boxes remains unknown, as does their intended purpose.
So this is one of the most mysterious places in all of Egypt, Giorgio.
Look how far all this goes. The boxes themselves are, 70 to 75 tons? And then the lids are estimated to be 20 to 25 tons.
It's one of the most mysterious things about this place is really how they managed to bring these heavy structures all the way down here when we're breathing heavily just to get to the end.
Can we actually go down to some of these?
Of course we can.
Wow. You know, I've always read about these, I've seen pictures, but it's humongous. You can walk underneath it.
As far as conventional Egyptologists and archaeologists are concerned, the sarcophagi were meant to house the remains of the sacred Apis bulls. But as only one of the tombs was found to contain animal remains, and all the others were found empty, the true nature of the Serapeum is a source of deep contention.
The Apis bull is a representation for god Osiris. And there's something very important to mention. Ancient Egyptians did not worship animals. Their concept was the gods sent the animals to be their messengers, and we have to respect them in that way.
It was said that the first ever Apis bull was created when a ray of light came down from heaven itself and struck this cow who produced the first Apis bull. So there is some relationship between the bull itself and the stars.
The sides and also here at the bottom, the polishing is perfect. And we can illustrate this by just looking
at the angle. I mean, it's a perfect 90-degree angle. Check this out. It is absolute perfection. It's easy to cut limestone, but to cut basalt is, that's a different story. What do these inscriptions here say?
These inscriptions were extremely important. You see the doors, specifically the so-called false doors. They were the doors that allowed the spirit, the Ka and the Pa, the spirit and the soul, to come out from the mummy and then read the hieroglyphic inscriptions. They wanted to make sure that these Apis bulls come back to life, go to eternity, so they could stay with Osiris in the sky.
Egypt, 1850. While excavating the underground structure at Saqqara, Egyptologist Auguste Mariette discovers a stela that identifies the complex as the Serapeum.
The Serapeum gets its name from Serapis, which was a Greek god that was a combination between an ancient Egyptian bull, Apis, and a Greek god at the time. And the combination between both was Serapis, and the Serapeum was the place where you go pray for that specific god.
The cult of the Apis bull, which later becomes known as Serapis, dates back to the very first dynasty. The very early kings of Egypt worshipped these particular bulls.
The Apis bull cult was extremely popular in Egypt all the way back 5,000 years ago. One of the first kings of ancient Egypt, the first dynasty, King Menes, who unified North Egypt and South Egypt together, would represent himself as a bull.
King Menes is documented as the first human pharaoh and is believed to have ruled around 3200 BC. According to their written history, before the reign of Menes, Egypt was ruled by the gods, who lived among humans on Earth. When the gods left, Menes inherited the throne from the god king Horus.
The ancient Egyptians believed that Horus was actually a god-man. He was a being of flesh and blood. The ancient Egyptians were in contact with the gods, physical manifestations, extraterrestrial beings who came and lived with them.
At the end of Horus's reign, the Egyptians wrote that the gods no longer lived among humans, but still held influence over earthly events. One point of connection between the gods and the mortal world was the Apis bull.
In many ways, the Apis bull was seen to be a personification of that contact between this world and the star world. So is it possible that the Serapeum is associated with the Apis bulls because there is some kind of connection with a celestial intelligence and what these underground structures really represent?
Could it be that the Serapeum of Saqqara was built more than 5,000 years ago and has a connection to otherworldly visitors? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest clues can be found by examining the size of these boxes.
When you think of a sarcophagus, you don't think of something so large as what's in the Serapeum. They're about 10 feet high and almost 20 feet long. And it's way too large for these Apis bulls.
In traditional Egyptian sarcophagi building, they would create the sarcophagus so that it very closely matched the dimensions of the body inside it in order to preserve it. These boxes are many times too large for even an Apis bull. So this is pointing to the idea that something else was concealed within these boxes.
Some ancient astronaut theorists believe an important clue as to what the giant stone boxes may have held can be found at a site 400 miles to the south. Armant, Egypt, 1929. British archaeologist Sir Robert Mond begins an excavation of an ancient catacomb called the Bukium and makes an extraordinary discovery.
there is a place called the Bukium, where they found similar type sarcophagi to the Serapeum, and it was at the Bukium where they found remains mummified in the shape of a bull. And they thought, finally, we found the remains of a mummified Apis bull. And they opened up the mummified remains, and they were confronted with this stinking mass of bitumen, which is asphalt, in which they found tiny, tiny fragments of bones. Now, it was anathema in ancient Egypt to destroy any dead bodies. You had to mummify them, and you had to mummify them intact.
Old Egyptians, they mummified everything. They mummified not only humans, they mummified birds, they mummified apes, they mummified dogs. Why do they mummify every animal? Because you can only be reincarnated when your body is conserved.
The Serapeum is one of the most inexplicable places on planet Earth. Forget Egypt. I am referring to the entire planet because there is no other place that is similar to the Serapeum.
The Serapeum is a vast underground complex at Saqqara in Egypt, just to the south of the Giza pyramid field. And within it are around 20 huge chambers filled with these enormous sized granite sarcophagi.
They are incredibly heavy. The bottom parts are estimated to weigh between 70 to 75 metric tons. The lids are estimated to weigh between 20 and 25 metric tons, which is a combined weight of 100 tons. And the workmanship with which these sarcophagi have been created is absolute perfection. The surfaces are polished, the corners are sharp. It's a giant mystery what happened there.
The Greek writer Herodotus, on his visit to Egypt around 450 BC, suggests that these massive sarcophagi were built to contain the remains of the Apis bull after each one died.
The Serapeum was given its name by the French explorer Mariette, who called the Serapeum the place of Serapis. Serapis was a Greek god that was the mixture of two ancient Egyptian figures, god Osiris, the god of good, and Apis the bull that represented god Osiris.
The remains that were found inside these giant boxes were crushed up bones from different animals. Now, right there, we have a huge problem because in ancient Egyptian religion, it was against the law to break up any mummies. They had to be mummified in perfect condition. So in my opinion, whatever was buried there, the ancient Egyptians never wanted those creatures to have an afterlife, or that these creatures would never be resurrected. So could it be that the Apis bull was some type of a genetically amplified monstrosity created by the gods?
Saqqara, situated on the west bank of the Nile River, 20 miles south of Cairo. This archaeological site is one of the oldest and largest burial grounds in all of Egypt.
Egyptologists called these monuments tombs, but to the Egyptians they were not tombs. They were gateways to the afterworld. It is through these structures that the king will begin a journey into the underworld in order to face obstacles, dangers, and threats. And if he would overcome these threats, he would be given passage into the afterlife kingdom of Osiris.
overlooking the immense necropolis, lies the pyramid of King Teti, the first ruler of Egypt's 6th dynasty. Teti built his pyramid and an adjoining mortuary temple during his reign more than 4,000 years ago.
I'm walking on what's left of the ancient causeway of King Teti I. That's his pyramid. And here is his very much ruined mortuary temple. Now, this pyramid is very important. It contains the oldest religious writing in the world, the pyramid texts.
According to archaeologists, the pyramid texts are a collection of ancient Egyptian religious writings that date back to 2400 BC. They contain passages about Osiris, the Egyptian god of the afterlife, and descriptions of how to prepare the pharaoh's remains during his ascent to the heavens after death.
The pyramid texts are all about the stars. It's all about the king becoming a star. It's all about the king ascending to the sky and joining Osiris, Orion in the sky.
But according to ancient astronaut theorists, the pyramid texts didn't only guide the pharaoh to an afterlife. They actually provided instruction on how the pharaoh could travel to other worlds.
What is important to realize is that the ancient Egyptians say that about 25,000 years ago, the gods lived amongst them. Then they disappeared again. What the pyramid texts are saying is that we, the ancient Egyptians specifically, of course, are able to reach the gods again. For this we have to die, but once we're dead, we're able to join the gods once again. What we're talking about is some kind of other dimensional travel for the soul to undertake.
Buried in the desert sands for centuries, the ruins of Saqqara are home to another ancient mystery just 1/2 mile away from the pyramid of King Teti. In 1850, French archaeologist Auguste Mariette made an astonishing discovery. He unearthed a massive underground bunker.
This is the most strange and mysterious place. It feels like being in the bowels of the underworld. It's hard to describe. It's like being in another world, the world of the dead.
The Serapeum contains enormous sarcophagi made from granite that was believed to have been transported from the city of Aswan, nearly 600 miles away.
This is just one of the many sarcophagus that are here. Dozens and dozens of them. And they weigh about 70 tons apiece. They're made from a solid block of granite. But the real mystery is how they cut them so sharply. Swiss watch precision, mirror smooth.
When you look at the inside of the boxes, you see the underside of the lid is perfectly square with the vertical surface of the inside of the box. Directly opposite, you have the same condition, which means that those two surfaces opposing each other must have been perfectly parallel. It's really amazing.